the salt come in around about the 1930s, and that was the finish of growing fruit in the area.
Driving past lead trees and salty bare patches and paddocks that aren't any use can be a bit depressing, and sometimes you wonder whether you should sell up and get whatever you can for the farm and move to a healthier area.
When we realised we were losing our best cropping ground, you know, it became a big concern, a really horrific concern actually, because we could see the salt rapidly spreading over the better of our ground, and you know, virtually we'd have to walk off if we couldn't get any production off this land.
Salt, masses of it, killing trees and leaving bare, useless ground in some of our best farmland. It's now a major problem we face in Australia. These areas were salty long before white settlement began, but that's not the worry. Because of our land clearing and farming methods, there are now new areas affected by salting. As only a small part of Australia is good farmland, this loss of land to salting should be of great concern to all of us. A large portion of our farm produce comes from the Murray-Darling Basin, which extends into 4 states. This river system supplies water for Australia's main irrigation areas and supports around 50% of our sheep and crop production. It's here that salt is causing major headaches. The irrigation farms in northern Victoria are probably worst hit. Here, the problem is what is known as wetland salinity. In the Kerrang irrigation area, which is close to the Murray, 25% of the land is seriously affected by salt. The problem was first noticed here as far back as the 1890s. In this region, salt can often be seen as white crystals lying on top of the ground. The cause is closely related to the amount of water collecting underneath the ground. Mike Patto from the Rural Water Commission Research Department explains.
One of the problems in this whole region here is that we're underlain by a water table, underground water if you like, which is something like about 1 to 2 metres below the surface. Now this water is of the same quality as seawater, so you can appreciate what a difficult problem it is to try and farm in this area. If we go back one stage further, before irrigation, this whole area had a water table probably at about 7 to 10 metres.
So, because of irrigation, huge quantities of extra water have lifted the level of the salty underground water table. This underground water doesn't collect in big hollow spaces, but rather in the soil itself, like water in a sponge. In this area, the water is salty because thousands of years ago, this part of Australia was under the sea. There are many types of salt, but the main one we're talking about is common salt, or sodium chloride, to give it its chemical name. To find out just how salty the water or soil is, an electric current is passed through a sample. The more salt there is, the more electricity flows through. Measurements are in electrical conductivity, or EC units, or in milligrams per litre. Drinking water for humans is acceptable if it's below 3,000 EC units. Sheep will drink water up to 20,000 EC units and cattle 8,000. Most crops will grow with water of 1,000 EC, and some plants are able to survive levels of 5,000. But the groundwater in some areas can reach 100,000 EC. That's twice as salty as seawater. Another big worry is that salty water draining out of the ground from irrigation farms flows back into the whole river network. The Murray-Darling system supplies 16 large urban centres with water, including Adelaide and Canberra. It costs around $10 million a year just to extract the salt. One creek alone dumps 200,000 tonnes of salt into the Murray each year. Salting isn't just happening in irrigation country. Some of our top pasture and cropland, particularly in Western Australia, South Australia and Victoria, is being hit by what is known as dry land salinity. In this case, the main cause is the clearing of native trees and possibly shrubs and grasses. Again, it's usually a problem of a rise in the underground water table. This time, the mechanism is more complicated. Let's look at a common situation. In many cases, trees have been removed from the higher areas in a catchment. The soils in these higher areas are thin and friable, so that once the trees have gone, the rainwater easily runs through and adds to the groundwater. So the water table rises. The water becomes salty as it moves through the rock and reaches the surface somewhere down the slope. It could be nearby or sometimes kilometres away. So, one farmer's actions can cause nightmares for another farmer further down the hill. Trees cleared above, salting down below. The early stages of dry land salting can be hard to recognise, but usually it's changes in the kind of vegetation or a fall in crop production. Some farmers don't even realise they've got a salinity problem. By the time there are dying trees and bare ground, it's going to take many years before the land can be reclaimed in some way. It's important to realise that salting isn't just a technical problem. It has a very real effect on people's lives.
Just the visual effect of going out each day and seeing the dead trees, seeing the dead grass and seeing your bare patches on your ground, it can, quite upset a lot of farmers and get them quite depressed.
Salting can also affect whole communities. Falling land prices, reduced production, no jobs, the death of a small town. We've looked in some detail at the salinity problem, but what's being done? Unfortunately, not enough. In Australia, most people live in our large cities, and a lot of them don't even realise that there is a salinity crisis. It doesn't affect their lives directly, but it could quite soon. We still rely heavily on farms for our national wealth, so a fall in agricultural output affects all of us in one way or another. Unfortunately, salinity control isn't a popular issue like rainforests or wood chipping. There just isn't as much pressure on our politicians to take action. So the amount of government money being spent to control salinity is far short of what's really needed. Despite this, farmers and agricultural advisors around the country are attempting to come to grips with the problem as best they can, with limited resources. In the dryland areas, the answer seems to be to put back the trees onto the hills and ridges. These trees act like pumps. They draw the water out of the ground with their roots and pass it into the atmosphere through the leaves. On average, a eucalypt could be expected to use 250 litres a day. In effect, the trees catch the water from the rain before it can add to the salty underground store. Surprisingly, tree planting can have a rapid effect. A tree can have its maximum leaf cover after only 5 years' growth. Down the slope, deep-rooted pasture can be grown, like this lucerne. Its root system can go down 2 metres, enabling it to lower the underground water. Apart from this, lucerne is useful for animal grazing. In the irrigation regions, it's not as simple, partly because there are such huge quantities of water involved. In this rice-growing area near Wakul in southern New South Wales, there's a very large-scale project to lower the groundwater. Salty water is pumped from the underlying sand beds to large, shallow evaporation basins. As the water evaporates, the salt solution becomes more concentrated. At the final stage, it can be harvested and sold to chemical companies. However, a number of local farmers are very worried about the leaks of salt water from these evaporation basins. Channels have been built in an effort to stop seepage, but there are doubts about how well these work. There's a similar large-scale project in Victoria. Bar Creek near Kerrang is the waterway that dumps so much salt into the Murray. To pacify South Australians and other water users downstream, some of this heavily salted water is being pumped into a chain of natural lakes. Here the water evaporates and again salt can be collected and sold. This sounds good, but once more the nearby farmers are very concerned about leaks and in this case have fought the scheme in court. Perhaps the most radical idea is to pipe the salt water away from the affected area all the way to the sea. Keith James explains.
Well, we formed this committee, it's entitled Pipe the Salt Committee, with the idea of piping the groundwater right out of the area rather than ponding it in evaporation basins all along the river. Evaporation basins leak, the water is only recirculated. It is pumped from the groundwater, put into evaporation basins, goes out the bottom and recycles. And a pipeline laid in the bed of the Murray River would pipe the salt right out of the area and put it into the sea.
Another alternative is to reduce the quantity of irrigation water soaking into the underground water store on the farm. Land can be very accurately graded and sloped using laser-controlled machinery. As a result, the water can drain rapidly off the surface of the ground before it can soak down too far. This water can be used again, collected and pumped back over other pasture or crops. This is a much more efficient use of irrigation water, and it reduces the quantity of salty water flowing back into our rivers. Gunn Jones is a farm advisor with the Department of Agriculture. He believes that these on-the-farm methods should receive priority.
There's been this tendency in the past to put in public scale schemes without looking at where the problem occurs. And to me, it would be far more a better proposition to attack the job on the farm or on the land wherever it occurs, as we've been doing in the Kerrang region here. We now have up to 25% of the land relayed out under laser grading, and when we've got a large proportion of our irrigable area relayed out, the amount of saline water which is required to be handled by these public scale schemes will be much lower than it was before we started 20 years ago. And that's when the public scale schemes are going to be required, and that's when they will be far more efficiently used.
But as Gunn Jones and others realise, all these on-farm improvements cost a lot of money. Many farmers just can't afford them. Clearly, the problem can't be solved by farmers alone. Politicians must be made to realise that it's a major problem affecting substantial areas of Australia. Only then can the necessary resources be applied to finding the best solutions in each area. And the sooner the better. As each day goes by, more and more farmland is being ruined by salt.